My next guest is one of an estimated 2 million people in the United States who suffer from agoraphobia. That's a fear of being in public or crowded spaces.
My name is Matt Brower, and I'm 45 years old. I suffer from panic anxiety disorder and agoraphobia. I've had this for 14 years now. I've lost friends and romantic relationships. It took me about 4 years after I became a full-blown agoraphobic to leave my house. If I travel a certain distance, whether it be walking like I'm doing now or driving, I get panic attacks or extremely high anxiety. It'll start in the pit of my stomach. I'll feel a little queasy, a little uncomfortable, a little lightheaded or dizzy. From there, I usually get like heart palpitations, racing heart rate. I'm currently 6 miles from my house, but I generally can't go more than 10 miles. That's why I had to pull over and stop. I'm outside of my comfort zone driving on my own. My biggest goal to regain my life would be to cross the George Washington Bridge and see that New York-New Jersey border.
Wow. Matt Brower joins us from his home in Center Reach on Long Island, New York. Wow. Matt, let me just start by saying thank you so much for sharing this with us. I know this is not easy, and I just appreciate you coming on. We heard you were diagnosed with agoraphobia, what's been 14 years ago. You were 31. And
Correct.
How did you know that something wasn't right? I've heard people describe it as this feeling of dread that would hit them. How did it affect you early on?
In the very beginning, when it first happened, it was like dread. It was to the point where I would leave my apartment to go to the store, or I'd leave my apartment to go to work, whatever it may be, and I would get this feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I would feel like something was wrong, like I was in danger, or I was going to collapse, faint, pass out. Something was going on, or my heart would start to race really bad. So it was tough in that respect.
You were at home for more than 4 years. You were not able to work. You lost friends. Relationships ended. How did you process it? I mean, it's almost as if the weight of it made you be willing to sacrifice everything.
In the beginning, for the first few years, I was able to travel a little bit, within, I'd say, a mile or two of my home. And then for the 4 years I was home, I couldn't go more than, driving-wise, a third of a mile, or even walking, I couldn't even go more than, say, 200 feet. So sacrificing wakes, funerals, birthday parties, weddings, big gatherings, and that's what caused me to lose the friendships and the relationships. And in fact, I was engaged when I was first diagnosed with it, and that relationship ended. But the positive is that that person was there for me afterwards, and she was even there when my cousin passed away. So she's like one of my closest friends at this point.
So people around you are trying to understand it as you are trying to understand. I know that during the pandemic, it gave you an opportunity to push yourself a bit more, which I find fascinating. All the rest of us are locked in, but this gave you an opportunity to figure out what's happening with you. How so?
Well, ironically, my dad passed away in 2020, same year as the pandemic started. Obviously, it wasn't related, but the crazy thing is that because things were closed down and the only thing that was open was essentials, I was able to get out there and drive more, so I didn't have to worry about the traffic. I didn't have to worry about too many people in stores. So not only that, but my mom is, compromised, and I needed to help her with shopping. So I kind of pushed myself a little bit more to gain what I needed to. So instead of me flying away in that fight or flight response, I was able to fight my way through and expand my area from, at that point, being maybe 2 to 3 miles to now, at this point, with somebody safe, I can travel up to 10 to 12 miles.
10 to 12 miles. So let me ask you, is there, the miles you explained, when you're in a room with people, is there like a number in which you start to feel uncomfortable? Are you okay with like 3 or 4 people? How does it hit you?
Social anxiety is not anything that involved with personally. I do know people that have social anxiety.
Yeah.
In fact, a couple of weekends ago, I went to said ex-fiance's current wedding.
Okay.
And there was well over 100 people there. It was, you know,
So you
it was
can be
about
around 100 people. It's the distance from home.
correct. It's what they
Wow.
call a comfort zone itself, or a comfort person.
Yeah.
So if you're traveling a distance or anything like that, you have a specific zone that you're comfortable with, and that's what really agoraphobia is involved with. It also involves being around a specific person. So
Mm.
I may be able to travel, say, 6, 7 miles by myself, but
Yeah.
if I'm with my therapist or somebody I feel comfortable or confident with, I can travel 10 to 12 miles.
Wow. We're going to have more with Matt after the break, and we're going to be joined by an expert who's helped hundreds of people live with their phobias. More next. Wow. We're back with Matt Brower, who was diagnosed with agoraphobia 14 years ago. Before the break, he told us he wasn't able to leave Long Island, his community there, since 2007. Well, yesterday we introduced Matt to a phobia expert, Dr. Matcha, who is a clinical psychologist and cognitive behavioral therapist specializing in the treatment of conditions just like Matt's. Take a look.
Matt, you've had so many ups and downs, which is so common. Are you aware of anything that might have triggered some of this panic and agoraphobia?
I was changing jobs late in 2007, finding out that I was going to be working overnight and being stuck in the building from 11 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning.
This is something I've seen with a lot of people is when that big agoraphobia event happens, it cascades everything.
Yes.
And a lot of people who have panic and agoraphobia, they might be trying to avoid feelings inside, maybe situations that you can't escape. Do you have a sense of what it is that you really avoid and what it is you're afraid of?
If I could explain it, I would be out of it. You know, I wouldn't have this issue.
That's something that I think a lot of people don't understand about panic attacks. It is a fear of fear. I'm wondering, what are some of the things that have best helped you to manage your anxiety?
Therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, retraining the brain has helped me.
You have done a lot of really difficult work. Sometimes people with anxiety can get labeled as being selfish, and I think that's so far from the truth. It's really about deeply caring and not wanting to cause harm to yourself and others.
Dr. Matcha is also with us today. He's joining us from San Francisco. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, I think, you know, we would have loved to have had you visit us here in the studio. You, as mentioned, haven't left Long Island since 2007. For people who are not from New York, that's about an hour-and-a-half drive from here. And I actually teared up when I saw your diary, your video diary, and you talked about the goal of the final stepping stone, which is going across the George Washington Bridge. Hopefully not on a day of traffic. But you know, do you have a calendar date where you say, okay, by this date, I want to try it?
I'm hoping by mid next year, at least. My goal right now is to just make it to a baseball game, hopefully this summer.
Dr. Matcha, I know you've not treated Matt, but you treat people with this type of phobia and others. I was interested in the fact that you were searching for a moment in Matt's past. Is that where a lot of these phobias can be traced is something that happened to us?
Yeah, usually what we see is people who struggle with anxiety are born with the volume turned up on anxiety. They go through life experiencing things in a more sensitive way to fears. And then oftentimes something happens that might trigger the phobia. Something happens that might be a bad experience, or they witness something bad happen to someone else, and now suddenly they might be experiencing a full-blown disorder.
Do these things usually start in childhood? Because, I mean, again, we're talking about one of my phobias, which happens to be adult cats. And I'm not kidding about, I know I laugh, but I remember sleeping over my aunt's house, and I was on the sofa, and I woke up, and the cat was near me. A sweet cat, but it just triggered something. And now, 50 years later, I cannot be in a room with an adult cat and not feel anxiety.
And that's why it's a serious problem, is anxiety gets in the way of your life, and it makes it hard for you to live life the way most people do. These
Well,
things
I don't want to
usually
compare
do
mine because
start
mine
very
doesn't
young.
get in the way of my life because I feel bad saying that with Matt here. His is getting in the way of his life. Mine makes me uncomfortable. His is that extreme that millions of people feel.
Yeah, well, these problems do start. Usually, it start pretty young, and it often takes a long time for someone to seek help for it. It's usually when things reach a boiling point, and maybe there's been a circumstance change in their life, and now suddenly that they were okay with,
Yeah.
it becomes a big problem.
Right. Well, Matt, I know that you helped create a support group for others online, people who suffer with agoraphobia. What has it been like to find others and you all help each one another in this?
It's honestly been really amazing, especially for myself. I've always been one of those people that help people in the long run.
Yeah.
People come to me that I don't even know and talk to me like it's nothing.
Ah,
But putting this group together has helped me to help others. And it reminds me of the fact that I'm not alone.
yeah.
And, you know, those people also realize that have joined my group in the last year or so have realized the same thing, that they're not
Not
alone in
alone.
this
That is
and
so
they have a
key.
support system.
That is so key. Well, I'll tell you what, Matt. I know that Dr. Matcha has agreed to speak with you again off camera to help you in any way possible get what you need. And when you are ready in a year and a half, I'm going to be on the other side of that George Washington Bridge. I'm going to have a big old sign, and it's going to say, "Welcome, Matt." I am going to be the first person. So you let us know when you're ready in your own time, and I'm going to be there greeting you on the other side of the George Washington Bridge when you are ready. Best of luck, Matt.